The human warship Defiance armor flared blinding white as it absorbed the Cation plasma salvo. Captain Tucker gripped the armrests of his command chair, eyes narrowed at the trio of angular alien ships poised to pounce at the edge of weapons range. The Cation's provocative assault just outside their border could be the spark that ignited a powder keg of fear and resentment between humanity and the other Galactic Council races. Tucker had to end this standoff decisively before it escalated into a full-scale interstellar war. He nodded to his tactical officer. "Target their lead ship and fire the Archon cannon." A focused beam of incandescent energy lanced out from the Defiance bow, spearing through the Cation flagship's shields to core through the vessel stem to stern. Secondary explosions blossomed along the alien craft's hull as the Archon beam sliced it apart. The bisected halves drifted away, spilling debris and bodies into the void. The remaining Cation ships lurched into evasive maneuvers and fled, shock and confusion palpable in their uncoordinated warp jumps. Tucker sagged back in his seat, the bridge crew's restrained cheers washing over him. They'd won this battle, but he feared a Pyrrhic victory. The Defiance revolutionary warp reactors and beam weapons were supposed to be humanity's ace in the hole, a deterrent to discourage their rivals in the Council from resorting to force in the brewing Cold War. Now their existence was revealed in the most provocative way possible. Tucker knew he'd be called to stand before the Galactic Council to answer for his actions today. There would be repercussions and accusations. Fear, anger, and envy were sure to follow. The Cations and the other Council races wouldn't see the Defiance miraculous survival as an act of self-defense, but as a display of human aggression and hubris. They would demand access to humanity's technological leaps and concessions of territory and influence. Hardliners would push for sanctions or even a preemptive strike to neuter Earth's resurgent power. Staring at the expanding cloud of debris that had been a Cation warship moments before, Tucker knew there would be no easy way to avoid the coming storm. Humanity's very survival as an independent interstellar nation might depend on his ability to walk the razor's edge between strength and diplomacy in the fateful days ahead. The atmosphere in the Galactic Council chamber was tense, as representatives from a dozen spacefaring civilizations debated the repercussions of the clash between the human warship Defiant and the Cation patrol vessels. Commander Tucker sat stiffly in his dress uniform, fists tight as accusatory glares stabbed at him from around the circular hall. Ambassador Zara of the Cations rose to address the council, her sleek fur rippling with suppressed agitation. "This unprovoked attack on our ships cannot go unanswered," she declared, voice ringing with conviction. "The humans have demonstrated alarming advancements in weapons technology that threaten the balance of power in the galaxy. We demand they share these developments with the Council, races in the interest of maintaining peace and stability." Murmurs of assent rumbled through the chamber. The Tigeran delegate, a stocky reptilian, thumped his fist on his console. "The humans have grown too bold, too fast. Their rapid expansion and militarization are a clear provocation. They must be contained before their ambitions plunge us all into war." Tucker gritted his teeth, fighting the urge to defend his actions. Earth's ambassador, a silver-haired woman named Evelyn Sato, rose to speak on humanity's behalf. As she began her appeal for reason and restraint, Tucker's thoughts drifted to memories of a different time, when the future had seemed so bright with possibility. 20 years ago, the first human diplomats had set foot on the Cation homeworld, marveling at the sleek spires and verdant gardens of the capital city. Admiral Nathaniel Hawkins, then a young captain, had been part of that delegation, eager to forge ties with the sophisticated feline species who had sponsored humanity's entry into the Galactic Council. He remembered long hours spent in negotiations with Ambassador Zara, hammering out the details of trade agreements and cultural exchange programs. She had been fiercely intelligent and passionate, determined to make the partnership between their species a model for the rest of the galaxy. Together they had worked to integrate human colonies into the galactic economy, establishing joint ventures and scientific collaborations. Cation instructors had trained human pilots in the art of zero-G combat, while human engineers shared their innovations in propulsion and energy production. For a time, it had seemed that their two species would lead the Council into a new era of prosperity and progress. But even then, there had been signs of trouble brewing. Tucker recalled heated debates in the council about the distribution of resources and representation for the poorer colony worlds. A charismatic Cation leader named Yarrick had begun stirring up resentment among the disaffected miners and laborers of the outer systems, decrying the concentration of wealth and power in the hands of a privileged few. At first, Yarrick's movement had seemed like a fringe group, a minor nuisance to be managed through token concessions and public relations campaigns. But as the years passed and the inequality grew, his message of revolution had gained traction. Rumors began to circulate of secret shipments of weapons and military equipment to his strongholds on the colony worlds. Ambassador Zara had grown increasingly concerned about Yarrick's influence, warning that he posed a grave threat to the stability of the Cation government and the council itself. But Admiral Hawkins, by then consumed with the challenges of expanding human territory and securing Earth's interests, had dismissed her fears as alarmist. Now, as Tucker sat in the council chamber, listening to the rising tide of anti-human sentiment, he wished that he had heeded Zara's warnings more carefully. The confrontation with the Cation ships had been a trap. He was certain of it now, a deliberate provocation orchestrated by Yarrick to incite the council races against humanity. As Ambassador Sato finished her speech to a smattering of polite applause, Tucker caught Zara's eye across the chamber. She inclined her head subtly, a silent signal that they needed to talk in private. Tucker's implants vibrated with an incoming encrypted message. "Meet me in the Arboretum at midnight. Come alone." He knew that his actions had made him a liability to the formal diplomatic efforts, but he couldn't just sit by and watch as Yarrick's schemes unraveled decades of hard-won progress. If there was a deeper plot at work here, a secret alliance between Yarrick and Horus, then he had to uncover the truth before it was too late. Tucker sent a terse reply to Zara, confirming the meeting. He would request a leave of absence, ostensibly to deal with personal matters back on Earth. But in reality, he would be embarking on a covert mission to the Cation colony world of Xelos, where Yarrick's power base was strongest. He thought of Kala, the young Cation spec ops agent Zara had introduced him to, fierce, brilliant, and utterly committed to rooting out the rot that threatened her society. Together, they would have to navigate a shadowy world of black market deals and backroom politics, risking everything to prevent the outbreak of a war that could destroy everything they had worked so hard to build. As the council session adjourned and the delegates began to file out, Tucker remained seated, his mind racing with plans and contingencies. He knew that the road ahead would be dangerous, that the odds were stacked against them, but he also knew that the stakes were too high to back down now. One way or another, he would get to the bottom of this conspiracy and ensure that the fragile peace between their species endured, regardless of the cost. The Cation mining colony of Xelos loomed before them, a pockmarked sphere of dull gray against the inky void. Commander Tucker gripped the controls of their battered freighter, easing it towards the dilapidated spaceport that clung to the planet's equator like a rusty parasite. "Final approach," he muttered to Kayla, who sat beside him in the cramped cockpit. The young Cation's fur bristled with tension as she scanned the incoming telemetry. "Multiple weapon signatures," she reported. "Looks like Yarrick's goons are out in force." Tucker nodded grimly. "Time to play our parts." As they touched down on the cracked landing pad, Tucker donned a pair of grease-stained coveralls, while Kayla applied a quick-setting dye to model her sleek coat. By the time the customs officers boarded, a pair of surly Cations with stun batons on their hips, they looked every inch the part of down-on-their-luck haulers. "Cargo manifest," one of the officers demanded, thrusting out a battered datapad. Tucker handed over a carefully forged chip. "Just spare parts and synth protein. Nothing exciting." The officer grunted, waving them through with barely a glance. As they stepped out onto the windswept tarmac, the acrid stench of industrial runoff assaulted their nostrils. In the distance, vast excavators clawed at the planet's surface, kicking up clouds of toxic dust. "Charming place," Tucker muttered. Kala's ears twitched. "This way, I hear they're recruiting for the morning shift." They joined a ragged line of laborers shuffling towards a squat prefab building. Burly guards in mismatched armor loomed at the entrance, their eyes sharp despite the early hour. Tucker felt the weight of their gazes as he and Kayla filed past. Inside, a bored-looking Cation behind a plasteel barrier processed the new arrivals. When it was their turn, he barely glanced up from his console. Names? Jace Holden, Tucker replied smoothly. This is my partner, Lyra. The clerk tapped a few keys. Experience? 3 years in the Rigelian belt, 2 on Ceres. Another disinterested grunt. You're on Team 7, Shaft 23B. Don't be late. As they followed the stream of workers towards the mine entrance, Tucker caught snippets of hushed conversation. Heard Yarrick's bringing in some big guns. About time someone stood up to the council fat cats. Sick of breaking our backs while they get rich. They boarded a rickety lift that plunged into the planet's depths. The air grew thick with dust and the acrid tang of ozone from overtaxed power couplings. When they finally reached their assigned level, Tucker's ears were ringing from the cacophony of drilling and crushing machinery. A grizzled foreman with a cybernetic eye shoved plasma cutters into their hands. Get to work, he barked. Quota's double today. For hours they labored in the sweltering darkness, muscles screaming as they attacked the unyielding rock. Tucker watched Kala from the corner of his eye, marveling at how easily she blended in with the other workers, despite her covert ops training. As their shift wore on, a young female Cation sidled up to Kala during a brief water break. You're new, she said, amber eyes narrowed. I'm Sira. Kala nodded cautiously. Lyra, this is Jace. Sira glanced around furtively before leaning in close. Word is there's some big operation going down. Strange shipments coming in at night. If you want in on some extra credits, meet me at the Red Dwarf Cantina after shift. Before they could respond, the foreman's amplified voice boomed through the cavern. Break's over! Back to work! As they hefted their cutters once more, Tucker and Kala exchanged a meaningful look. Their mission was already bearing fruit, but they both knew the real dangers were just beginning. Tucker and Kala barely had time to catch their breath after the grueling shift, before they found themselves in the dimly lit confines of the Red Dwarf Cantina. The air hung heavy with the acrid smoke of cheap cigars and the sour stench of spilled liquor. Sira materialized from the shadows, her amber eyes darting nervously. Follow me, she whispered, leading them to a secluded booth. As they settled in, a grizzled Cation with cybernetic implants visible beneath his matted fur slid into the seat across from them. I'm Galen, he growled softly. Sira tells me you're interested in some extracurricular work. Tucker leaned forward, his voice low. We've got skills that are being wasted in the mines. Heard there might be better opportunities. Galen's organic eye narrowed. Maybe, but first we need to be sure you're not council plants. Before Tucker could respond, the cantina's doors burst open. A squad of Yarrick's guards stomped in, plasma rifles at the ready. Raid! Someone shouted. Chaos erupted as patrons scrambled for the exits. In the confusion, Galen grabbed Tucker's arm. If you're really who you say you are, meet us at these coordinates in 2 hours. Bring only what you can carry. As the guards began roughing up the remaining customers, Tucker and Kala slipped out a side exit, hearts pounding. They exchanged a silent look of understanding. Their mission was accelerating faster than they'd anticipated. 2 hours later, they found themselves aboard a battered freighter on the outskirts of the colony. Galen paced the cramped cargo hold, outlining their plan to a motley assortment of resistance fighters. Yarrick's been stockpiling weapons on Zalos's moons, he explained, pulling up a holographic display. We've got a narrow window to hit them before he moves everything off-world. As Galen delved into the specifics of their insertion plan, Sira approached Kala, her tail twitching nervously. Can we talk? She asked softly, leading Kala to a quiet corner. Kala's fur prickled with anticipation. What is it? Sira's eyes met hers, filled with a mix of fear and willpower. I know we haven't known each other long, but I feel a connection between us. If we don't make it through this... Without warning, Sira leaned in and pressed her lips to Kala's. The kiss was fierce, desperate, charged with the weight of their uncertain future. When they parted, Kala cupped Sira's face gently. We'll get through this, she promised, together. As the resistance fighters made their final preparations, Tucker received an encrypted message from Admiral Hawkins. The situation back at the council was deteriorating rapidly. They needed proof of Yarek's conspiracy, and they needed it now. Galen's voice cut through the nervous chatter. Launch in 5 minutes. May the spirits guide our claws. The next few hours passed in a blur of adrenaline and plasma fire. Tucker's team touched down on the largest moon base, their stealth shuttles barely registering on the antiquated sensor grid. They moved swiftly through the low-gravity environment, Kala's deadly accuracy with her sniper rifle clearing a path through the surprise patrols. They fought their way to the command center, Tucker's fingers flying over the consoles as he downloaded terabytes of incriminating data. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the facility. "We've been made!" shouted one of Galen's fighters. The bulkhead doors exploded inward. Through the smoke strode a massive Caitian guard, his muscles rippling beneath his armor. Tucker's blood ran cold as he recognized the face. It was Galen's second-in-command. "Traitor!" Kala snarled, her vibroblades flashing as she launched herself at the mole. The two Caitians became a whirlwind of slashing claws and gleaming metal. Tucker tried to get a clean shot, but they were moving too fast in the chaotic melee. A scream pierced the air. Sira crumpled to the ground, clutching a smoking wound in her side. Kala's eyes blazed with fury. She redoubled her assault on the traitor, driving him back with a flurry of strikes. But the larger Caitian's reach gave him the advantage, and Kala found herself on the defensive. Just as the traitor was about to land a killing blow, Tucker's plasma bolt caught him in the shoulder. The momentary distraction was all Kala needed. Her blades found their mark, and the mole collapsed in a heap. "We need to move," Tucker shouted, scooping up the wounded Sira. They fought their way back to the shuttles, Galen's voice crackling over the comms with news of his own team's retreat. As they broke atmosphere, the sky lit up with the arrival of Yarek's war fleet. Tucker's hands flew over the controls, plotting an escape vector. He opened a secure channel to Admiral Hawkins, transmitting the stolen data. "We've got the proof," he reported grimly, "but Yarek's about to glass this entire system. We need backup, and we need it now." As they limped towards the relative safety of Zalos, Tucker could only hope they'd done enough to prevent all-out war. But with Yarek's forces converging and the council chambers in uproar, he knew the real battle was only just beginning. The void above Zalos erupted with sudden brilliance as Admiral Hawkins's fleet dropped out of hyperspace. Tucker's eyes widened at the sight of the massive armada, a patchwork of human and galactic council vessels united against a common foe. "Cavalry's here," he muttered, allowing himself a fleeting moment of hope. But that hope was short-lived. As the Allied ships moved to establish a defensive perimeter around the planet, a blinding pulse of energy erupted from Yarek's flagship. The ion weapon's effects were instantaneous and devastating. One by one, the fleet's systems winked out, leaving them drifting helplessly in orbit. On the planet's surface, the situation deteriorated rapidly. Tucker and his team huddled in a makeshift bunker, the ground shaking from orbital bombardment as Yarek's forces methodically obliterated Galen's resistance strongholds. "We've lost contact with bases 3 and 7, Sira reported, her voice tight with pain from her barely healed wound. "They're cutting us off, sector by sector." Kala paced restlessly, her claws flexing. "We can't just sit here and wait to be picked off." Tucker's mind raced, weighing their dwindling options. The resistance fighters looked to him, desperation etched on their faces. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what had to be done. "We're not waiting," he declared. "We're taking the fight to Yarek." In the next hour, Tucker outlined a plan so audacious it bordered on suicidal. Using intel from their previous raid, they identified a vulnerability in Yarek's command bunker defenses. It would require perfect timing and more than a little luck, but it was their only shot. As they prepared to move out, Galen pulled Tucker aside. "You know this is probably a one-way trip," the grizzled Caitian growled. Tucker nodded grimly. "Sometimes you have to roll the hard 6. Their strike team moved swiftly through Zalos's ruined streets, using the chaos of the ongoing battle as cover. They reached the perimeter of Yarek's compound just as a fresh wave of dropships descended, disgorging platoons of heavily armed troops. "Now or never," Tucker whispered. They surged forward, using the confusion of the troop deployment to slip past the outer defenses. Kala's vibroblades flashed in the dim light as she dispatched sentries with terrifying efficiency. They fought their way deeper into the complex, alarms blaring in their wake. As they neared the inner sanctum, a hail of plasma fire erupted from a fortified position. Tucker saw the muzzle flash an instant before Kala did. Without thinking, he hurled himself at her, knocking her clear as searing pain lanced through his side. The world grew hazy, the sounds of battle fading to a dull roar. Tucker was vaguely aware of Kala dragging him to cover, of Galen's team breaching the final defenses. Then darkness claimed him. He drifted in and out of consciousness, catching fragmented glimpses of sterile medical bays and worried faces. When he finally clawed his way back to full awareness, Kala was there, her amber eyes filled with a mix of relief and barely suppressed fury. "How long?" Tucker croaked, his throat dry. 3 days, Kala replied. "You've missed a lot." As she filled him in on the Council's ultimatum and the looming threat to human colonies, Tucker felt a cold dread settle in his gut. He knew what had to be done, even as every fiber of his being recoiled from the idea. "Get me to a secure terminal," he ordered, pushing himself up despite the protest of his healing wounds. "It's time to activate the Vanguard Protocol." Kala's eyes widened in shock. "Tucker, you can't be serious. That kind of firepower could—" "I know," he cut her off, "but we're out of options." Minutes later, Tucker's trembling fingers input the final command sequence. On a nondescript human cruiser at the edge of the system, banks of esoteric technology hummed to life. As Yarek's armada approached Xelos, ready to crush the last pockets of resistance, a single ship emerged to meet them. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a wave of scintillating energy erupted from the vessel, expanding outward at impossible speed. Every ship in its path, friend and foe alike, went dark. The wave continued to spread, enveloping the entire system in its otherworldly glow. In the stunned silence that followed, Tucker's voice crackled across every comm channel, laying bare the full extent of Yarek's treachery. As the broadcast concluded, he turned to Kala, exhaustion etched on his face. "Now comes the hard part," he said softly, "picking up the pieces." Pieces! Tucker's words hung in the air as the full weight of their actions settled over them. The aftermath of the Vanguard Protocol's activation was unlike anything they had anticipated. As systems across Xelos flickered back to life, the silence of space was replaced by a cacophony of panicked transmissions. Yarek's fleet hung motionless in orbit, their weapons systems rendered inert by the pulse. "We've got incoming," Kala reported, her ears twitching as she monitored the comms. "It's Admiral Hawkins." Tucker straightened, wincing at the pull of his wound. "Put her through." Admiral Hawkins's hologram materialized, her face a mask of concern. "Commander, what in blazes did you just do?" "What I had to, Admiral," Tucker replied, his voice steady despite his exhaustion. "Yarek's fleet is neutralized, and we have irrefutable proof of his treachery." As Tucker relayed the evidence they had uncovered, Hawkins's expression shifted from disbelief to unshakable focus. "This changes everything," she said. "The Council needs to hear this immediately." Over the next hours, the political landscape shifted as dramatically as the military one. Yarek's surrender was broadcast across every channel, his once loyal supporters reeling from the revelations of his conspiracy. But even as the immediate threat subsided, new tensions arose. Tucker found himself in the heart of a diplomatic storm. Council hardliners pushed for a swift and brutal response to crush the uprising once and for all. Their voices rose in anger as Tucker advocated for restraint. "We can't fight our way out of this," he argued, his words echoing through the council chambers. "More violence will only breed more resentment. We have a chance here, a chance for real change." Admiral Hawkins stood by his side, her presence lending weight to his words. "Commander Tucker's actions, while unorthodox, have given us an opportunity we can't afford to squander." As the debate raged, a familiar face appeared in the chamber. Zara, the Caitian diplomat Tucker had come to respect, moved to address the council. Her words were measured, but Tucker could sense the passion behind them. We stand at a crossroads, she began. We can choose the path of retribution, or we can forge a new way forward. I propose an emergency summit, a chance for all voices to be heard, for the inequalities that have driven this conflict to be addressed. The council chamber erupted in a mix of outrage and support. Tucker caught Zara's eye, giving her a subtle nod of appreciation. It was a start, but he knew the real work was just beginning. As preparations for the summit got underway, Tucker found himself pulled in a dozen directions at once. He coordinated with Kala's team to bolster security, acutely aware of the powder keg they were sitting on. Every report of unrest in the colonies set him on edge. Late one night, as he pored over intelligence briefings, Zara sought him out. Her usually composed demeanor was shaken, her tail twitching with nervous energy. "Tucker," she said quietly, "I fear we may have underestimated the danger we face." He looked up, instantly alert. "What do you mean?" Zara's eyes darted around the room before she leaned in close. "There are whispers among Yarek's most radical supporters. They see this summit as a betrayal of their cause. I'm afraid they might attempt something drastic." Tucker's mind raced, considering the implications. An assassination? Zara nodded grimly. It would reignite the conflict in an instant. Without hesitation, Tucker activated his comlink. "Kala, I need you and your team on high alert. We've got credible threats to the summit. I want every Cation militant faction under surveillance. Understood?" As Kala acknowledged the order, Tucker turned back to Zara. "We'll stop them," he promised, "whatever it takes." The summit opened under a cloud of tension. Human and Cation delegates eyed each other warily as negotiations began. Tucker watched from the sidelines, keenly aware of the fragility of the peace they were trying to build. Progress was slow. Each proposal for reform or reparations was met with suspicion and counterdemands. Tucker found himself constantly mediating, drawing on every ounce of diplomatic skill he possessed. It was during a recess, as delegates filed out of the chamber for a brief respite, that all hell broke loose. The sound of weapons fire echoed through the halls, followed by screams of panic. Tucker's hand flew to his sidearm as he sprinted towards the source of the commotion. "Kala, report!" he barked into his comm. "Perimeter breach," Kala's voice came back, punctuated by the sound of plasma bolts. "Multiple hostiles, heavily armed. They're heading for the main chamber." Heart pounding, Tucker rounded a corner to see a scene of chaos. Bodies lay strewn across the floor, both human and Cation. And there, in the center of it all, stood a figure Tucker had hoped never to see again. Horus, the disgraced ambassador, held a plasma rifle to Zara's head. His eyes blazed with fanatical intensity as he surveyed the room. "Nobody move," he snarled, "or the traitor dies." Tucker's mind raced, searching for a way out of this nightmare. He locked eyes with Zara, saw the fear and persistence warring in her gaze. In that moment, he knew what he had to do. "Wait," Tucker called out, slowly raising his hands. "You want independence for the colonies? I'll give it to you. Just let her go." Horus's eyes narrowed, his grip on Zara tightening. "You expect me to believe that?" "It's the truth," Tucker insisted, taking a careful step forward. "But I need her alive to make it happen. You kill her, and any chance of peace dies with her." For a heartbeat, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then Horus's finger tightened on the trigger. Time slowed to a crawl. Tucker saw the plasma bolt leave the weapon, saw Zara's eyes widen in shock, and then, in a blur of motion, Kala was there. Her vibroblade flashed, catching Horus's arm and sending the shot wide. The room erupted into chaos once more. Security forces swarmed in, subduing Horus and his remaining followers. But Tucker had eyes only for Zara, collapsed on the floor in a growing pool of blood. He knelt beside her, frantically applying pressure to the wound. "Stay with me," he urged. "Come on, Zara, stay with me." Her eyes fluttered open, focusing on his face with effort. "Tucker," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Promise me." "Anything," he said, fighting back the lump in his throat. "My people," Zara gasped. "Their voices must be heard, their needs met, or this will never end." Tucker nodded, his vision blurring. "I promise," he swore. I'll make it happen. Just hold on. But even as the words left his mouth, he felt Zara's body go limp. The light faded from her eyes, leaving behind an emptiness that struck Tucker to his core. In the days that followed, Zara's sacrifice became a rallying cry for peace. Human and Cation alike gathered to honor her memory, united in grief and in hope for a better future. As negotiations resumed, Tucker found himself at the center of it all. He carried Zara's final words with him, a constant reminder of the stakes they faced. With each concession won for the impoverished colonies, with each step toward genuine reform, he felt the weight of his promise. But even as progress was made, Tucker couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The wounds of mistrust and resentment ran deep, and healing them would take more than words on paper. As he looked out over the assembled delegates, human and Cation alike, he knew the real work was just beginning. Tucker's promise to Zara echoed in his mind as he faced the assembled Galactic Council. The chamber buzzed with tension, a powder keg of competing interests and deep-seated grievances. We cannot ignore the systemic inequalities that have pushed our colonies to the brink, Tucker argued, his voice steady despite the exhaustion etched on his face. The reforms on the table are not just necessary, they're overdue. A Cation counselor bristled, fur standing on end. And what of the cost to established worlds? We cannot simply upend centuries of economic policy on a whim. With respect, counselor, Tucker countered, the cost of inaction will be far greater. We've seen where that path leads. For weeks, the negotiations dragged on. Tucker found himself caught between warring factions, human and Cation alike. He pored over economic projections, brokered compromises, and fought tooth and nail for every concession. Finally, after countless sleepless nights, a breakthrough. The council chambers erupted in a mix of cheers and disgruntled muttering as the landmark agreement was announced. Tucker allowed himself a moment of satisfaction, but the knot in his stomach told him the real work was just beginning. His comm unit chirped urgently. "Tucker, you need to see this." Kayla's voice came through, tense and clipped. Moments later, Tucker stared at the video feed from Avalon. Samuel Thorne, his face contorted with rage, railed against the council's decision. "They would sell out humanity to appease alien terrorists?" Thorne shouted to the roaring crowd. "We must take back what is ours." Tucker's fists clenched as he watched the unrest unfold. But before he could formulate a response, another alert came through. "Commander," it was Galen, his voice grim. "We've got a situation in the Cation sector. Braca's making her move." The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Tucker turned to Kayla, seeing his own tenacity mirrored in her eyes. "We need a team," he said. "Off the books, no official sanction." Kala nodded, already compiling a mental list. "I know just the people." Within hours, they had assembled in a secure briefing room. Catherine Chase, her eyes sharp behind her unassuming exterior, absorbed every detail of Braca's operations. Admiral Ian Cross sat with arms crossed, his weathered face betraying no emotion, as Tucker laid out the scope of Thorne's insurrection. "We'll have to split up," Tucker concluded. "Cross, you and your strike teams take Avalon. Shut Thorne down before this spreads any further. Chase, I need you to get back inside Braca's organization. Find out what she's planning." As the team dispersed to their assignments, Tucker felt the weight of command settle heavily on his shoulders. He turned to Kayla, allowing a flicker of vulnerability to show. "You ready for this?" he asked softly. Kala's hand found his, squeezing briefly. "Always." The next days passed in a blur of covert operations and tense standoffs. Tucker and Kayla raced across Cation space, following the trail of destruction left by Braca's forces. Each step brought them closer to their quarry, but the cost in lives and devastated outposts grew with each passing hour. Then came the breakthrough they'd been waiting for. Chase's voice crackled over a secure channel, her words sending a chill down Tucker's spine. "It's worse than we thought," she reported. "Braca's reactivated some kind of ancient weapons platform. If she brings it online—" Tucker didn't need her to finish the thought. He barked orders, coordinating with Kala's infiltration team as they prepared to breach the orbital foundry. The battle that followed was chaos incarnate. Tucker led squads through twisting corridors of alien machinery, the air thick with plasma fire and the acrid smell of burning metal. He caught glimpses of Kayla locked in furious combat with Braca, their forms blurring as they dueled amidst the Foundry's pulsing core. With seconds to spare, Tucker's team placed their charges. He felt the rumble of the explosions even as he sprinted for the extraction point, praying they'd done enough to cripple Braca's doomsday weapon. As Hawkins's ships engaged the militant fleet, Tucker allowed himself a moment of hope. But even as Braca was brought in chains, he knew this victory was far from complete. The return to Avalon brought a new set of challenges. Ian Cross had contained the worst of the violence, but at a cost. The streets were eerily quiet under the watchful eyes of human troops. In a secluded command center, Cross laid out his vision for humanity's future. "We have the power to secure our dominance," he argued, eyes gleaming with conviction. "No more compromises, no more pandering to alien demands." Tucker felt the weight of the galaxy on his shoulders as he looked at the man he'd once considered a mentor, the reformer and the hardliner, locked in a battle for humanity's soul. "You're asking me to throw away everything we fought for," Tucker said quietly. Cross's expression hardened. "I'm asking you to ensure humanity's survival. Make your choice, Commander." Tucker's mind raced, weighing the consequences of his next words. The fate of two species hung in the balance. Tucker's gaze locked with Cross's, the weight of his decision pressing down on him like a physical force. The command center hummed with tension, every eye fixed on the two men. "You're asking me to throw away everything we fought for," Tucker said, his voice low but firm. Cross's expression hardened, jaw clenching. "I'm asking you to ensure humanity's survival. Make your choice, Commander." Tucker's mind raced, memories of battles fought alongside Kala and the Cation resistance flashing through his consciousness. He saw the devastation wrought by inequality, the pointless suffering on both sides. Yet he couldn't ignore the rising tide of extremism threatening human colonies. He took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. "We need a compromise," Tucker began, his words measured. "Human protection forces to secure unstable regions temporarily, just until we can ensure the reforms are implemented in good faith." Cross's eyes narrowed, his voice dripping with disdain. "Compromise? With aliens? Absolutely not. We will not cede one iota of control over human assets." The argument might have spiraled further, but a sharp knock on the door interrupted them. Admiral Hawkins strode in, his weathered face grave. "Gentlemen," he said, "we have a situation." In the tense meeting that followed, Hawkins laid out the intelligence. "Avalon extremists have acquired antimatter warheads," he explained, his words sending a chill through the room. "We suspect rogue council factions opposing the reforms may be involved." Tucker's blood ran cold. "If those weapons are detonated—" Hawkins nodded grimly. "We need to neutralize this threat now." Cross's lips curled into a sneer. "And how do you propose we do that, Admiral? By holding hands with the Caitians and singing Kumbaya?" Tucker's patience snapped. "Enough," he growled. "This is bigger than your prejudices, Cross. We need a joint human-Caitian operation." For a moment, it seemed Cross would refuse, but faced with the specter of antimatter devastation, even he couldn't deny the necessity. "Fine," he spat, "but I want full oversight." Within hours, Catherine Chase's intelligence network had pinpointed the location of the antimatter cache. As night fell over Avalon, Tucker found himself crouched beside Kayla, leading a mixed force of human Marines and Cation spec ops into the heart of the extremist base. The raid was a maelstrom of plasma fire and close-quarters combat. Tucker moved on instinct, years of training guiding his actions as he cleared room after room. He caught glimpses of Kayla, her movements a deadly dance as she incapacitated enemy after enemy. But something was wrong. Cross's forces seemed to be deliberately provoking conflicts with the Cation troops, risking the entire mission. Tucker's suspicions grew with each passing moment. They fought their way to the antimatter storage, bodies of friend and foe alike littering the corridors behind them. As Tucker input the override codes, a shout of alarm rang out. He spun to see one of Cross's men, eyes wild with fanaticism, lunging for the warhead controls. Time seemed to slow as Tucker raised his weapon, squeezing the trigger even as his mind reeled at the implications. The traitor crumpled, mere inches from the detonator. Tucker's ears rang in the sudden silence, his chest heaving as he stared at the fallen soldier. Kala's voice cut through the haze. "Tucker, we need to move!" As they secured the antimatter and began their withdrawal, Tucker's mind raced. The threat was neutralized, but at what cost, and how deep did the conspiracy run? He knew the hardest decisions still lay ahead. But as he looked at Kala, her fur matted with sweat and grime, willpower burning in her eyes, Tucker felt a glimmer of hope. Together, they would forge a new path, for humans, for Caitians, for all the peoples of the galaxy. The Eridani sector stretched before them, a canvas of uncharted stars and swirling nebulae. Commander Tucker stood on the bridge of the UES horizon, his eyes fixed on the main view screen. Beside him, Kala's tail swished with almost unchecked excitement. "Quite a view," Tucker murmured, allowing himself a small smile. Kala nodded, her fur rippling in the low light. To think, just a few years ago. She didn't need to finish the thought. The memories of their struggles, the battles, the politics, the near catastrophe hung between them like a tangible presence. "Sensors are picking up some unusual readings, Commander," Lieutenant Park called from her station. "Gravimetric distortions, unlike anything in our database." Tucker's brow furrowed. On screen. The view shifted, revealing a vast region of space where stars seemed to bend and twist. It was as if reality itself was being warped by some unseen force. "Fascinating," Kala breathed, leaning forward to study the phenomenon. Tucker felt a familiar tug of curiosity, warring with the caution born of hard experience. After a moment's hesitation, he made his decision. "Helm, take us in for a closer look. Nice and easy." As they approached the anomaly's perimeter, the ship began to shudder. Warning klaxons blared as systems flickered and failed. "Sir, we're caught in some kind of gravitational pull," the helmsman shouted, fingers flying over his console. "Full reverse," Tucker ordered, gripping his chair as the deck plates trembled beneath him. But it was too late. Space itself seemed to tear open before them, a swirling vortex of impossible energies. The horizon was drawn inexorably inward, tumbling end over end as it plunged into the unknown. For an eternal instant, there was nothing but darkness and the sickening sensation of falling. Then, with a lurch that sent half the bridge crew sprawling, they emerged. "Report!" Tucker barked, hauling himself back to his feet. "Sensors coming back online," Park responded, her voice shaky. "Sir, I don't think we're in the Eridani sector anymore." The view screen flickered to life, revealing a graveyard of shattered worlds and colossal debris fields. Ghostly remnants of megastructures drifted in the void, testaments to a civilization of staggering proportions. "My God," Tucker whispered, "what happened here?" Over the next hours, the Horizon's crew worked feverishly to make sense of their surroundings. Scans revealed the telltale signs of an apocalyptic event, one that had scoured entire star systems clean of life millions of years in the past. "Commander," Kala called, her eyes gleaming with barely suppressed excitement. "You need to see this." She gestured to a holographic display, showing the intricate dance of gravitational fields throughout the region. These aren't natural formations. Someone was manipulating the very fabric of space-time on a cosmic scale. Tucker's mind reeled at the implications. "Can you pinpoint a source?" Kala nodded, bringing up an image of a massive debris field orbiting a bloated red supergiant. At its center was a structure that defied comprehension, a fragment of curved metal larger than any planetoid. "I believe," Kala said softly, "that we're looking at a piece of a Dyson sphere." Hours later, Tucker led an away team through the cavernous interior of the megastructure. Their footsteps echoed in halls designed for beings of unimaginable scale, past control stations that hummed with residual energy after eons of disuse. "Over here," Dr. Reeves called out, her voice tinged with awe. "I think I've found a data cache." As the science team worked to interface with the alien systems, Tucker felt a chill run down his spine. The secrets locked away in this place could revolutionize their understanding of the universe. or unleash devastation beyond imagining. A holographic display flickered to life, filling the chamber with ghostly images of a species long extinct. Tucker watched in growing horror as the story of their downfall unfolded. A civilization that had unlocked the deepest secrets of reality, only to tear itself apart in an orgy of cosmic engineering gone wrong. "Sir," Lieutenant Kim's voice crackled over the comm, "we're detecting energy signatures. Faint but consistent with..." "With what, Lieutenant?" There was a pause, heavy with implications. "With a civilization rebuilding, sir. Somewhere out there in the dark." Tucker exchanged a long look with Kala, seeing his own mix of wonder and apprehension mirrored in her eyes. They stood at a crossroads, with the fate of not just their expedition, but potentially all known space hanging in the balance. "Prep a long-range shuttle," Tucker ordered, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "We need to make contact one way or another." As the away team rushed to comply, Tucker's gaze drifted to the sea of stars visible through a breach in the ancient hull. Somewhere out there, an unimaginably powerful species was stirring. Whether they would be allies in preserving the cosmic order or an existential threat to all he held dear remained to be seen. The mission to chart new worlds had become something far greater, a journey that would test not just Tucker's skills as a commander, but his very understanding of humanity's place in the universe. The long-range shuttle cut through the void, its engines humming with nearly unleashed power. Tucker sat at the helm, his fingers dancing across the controls as he guided their craft towards the source of the energy signatures. Beside him, Kayla's eyes were fixed on the sensor readouts, her tail twitching with a mixture of anticipation and unease. "We're approaching the binary star system," Tucker announced, his voice tight with tension. "Sensors are picking up a massive debris field." The view screen flickered to life, revealing a graveyard of shattered worlds and twisted megastructures. Ghostly remnants of a civilization beyond imagining drifted silently through the cosmic dark. "By the Maker," Kala breathed, her fur standing on end. "What could have done this?" Tucker shook his head, a cold knot forming in his stomach. "I don't know, but we're about to find out." As they penetrated deeper into the debris field, proximity alarms began to wail. Tucker's hands flew over the controls, but it was too late. A swarm of metallic shapes detached themselves from larger chunks of detritus, converging on the shuttle with terrifying speed. "Evasive maneuvers!" Tucker barked, but the constructs were too fast, too numerous. They latched onto the hull, their drill-like appendages punching through the reinforced plating as if it were tissue paper. The shuttle rocked violently as atmosphere vented into space. Emergency force fields snapped into place, but Tucker knew it was only a temporary measure. He watched in horror as the scorpion-like machines poured through the breaches, their metal bodies gleaming under the emergency lights. "Fall back!" Kayla shouted, her plasma rifle already spitting superheated death at the invaders. "We need to seal off the forward compartments." Tucker hesitated for a split second, torn between his duty as a commander and his instinct to fight. But as he saw crew members cut down by the relentless assault, he knew there was only one choice. "Engineering!" he yelled into his comm unit as he retreated, laying down covering fire. "I need those alien command protocols decrypted now." The next few minutes were a blur of plasma fire, screams, and the sickening crunch of metal on bone. Tucker found himself shoulder to shoulder with Kayla, fighting a desperate rearguard action as they fell back through the shuttle's compartments. "They're not trying to kill us," Kayla growled, her keen senses picking up on the machine's behavior. "Look, they're targeting systems, not personnel." Tucker's blood ran cold as he realized the implications. "They're sterilizing the ship," he whispered. A triumphant shout came over the comm, cutting through the chaos. "Commander, we've broken through the encryption!" Tucker's relief was short-lived. As the data streamed across his neural interface, he felt the color drain from his face. The cosmic manipulations of this long-dead civilization had unleashed forces beyond imagining, nearly unraveling the very fabric of reality. "Kala," he said, his voice hoarse, "we can't let this knowledge spread. If anyone else tries to harness this power..." He never finished the sentence. With a screech of tearing metal, the bulkhead behind them gave way. Cyber tendrils lashed out, impaling Kala before Tucker could react. He watched in horror as her eyes went wide, her body convulsing as the machines forcibly downloaded her cerebral matrix. "Tucker," she gasped, fighting against the invasion with every fiber of her being. "You have to stop this. Contain it, at any expense." Tears streaming down his face, Tucker pulled her close one last time. "I promise," he whispered. With trembling hands, he activated the shuttle's self-destruct sequence. As the countdown began, he opened a channel to Galactic Command, pouring out everything they had learned in a desperate final transmission. The machines breached the last barrier just as the message concluded. Tucker closed his eyes, Kayla's lifeless body still cradled in his arms. There was a moment of searing heat, a flash of impossible light, and then... nothing. The shockwave expanded outward, consuming the shuttle, the ancient constructs, and the billion-year-old secrets they guarded. It rippled through the binary star system, scouring away all trace of the cosmic manipulators and those who had sought to understand them. In the vast, uncaring depths of space, a final echo of Commander Tucker's warning raced outward, carrying with it the hope that others might learn from their fatal curiosity, and the prayer that some secrets were best left buried in the cosmic dark.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.